Question of the day. How do you get big arms? What's the secret to building a great looking bicep, a tricep that you can be really proud of? And in this video, I want to give you guys the 3 most common mistakes that I see guys make all the time with training arms that is holding them back from maximizing their full potential. So these mistakes and this video is not a quick fix. This is not a magic pill solution. This is not a video that you're gonna watch now. You're gonna apply some weird trick that is in 5 minutes and then you go to bed, wake up tomorrow and your arms are huge. No, that's not gonna happen. I mean, if you think that is possible, you're lying to yourself. This is the reality. This video, these 3 mistakes and avoiding them and applying these solutions plus hard work will get you there, will get you those arms that you can be proud of. And let's face it, I mean, arms are the muscle group that a lot of guys care about the most, and arms, chest, abs, shoulder, these are the groups that a lot of people will see if they're looking at you and if they're looking at your body. If you're interested in aesthetics, I mean, for bodybuilding, these are definitely those highlights of your physique. So let's work on them. So number 1, let's point out the elephant in the room. Some guys, there's about a quarter of guys, about 25% in every gym that can get away with doing barely anything for arms and their arms look fantastic. So first off, let's point that out. So if you see a guy who's doing some random stuff in the gym, cheat curls, random reps, barely any work for their arms, just saying to people, hey, you can just lift heavy, bro, or just do some basic pushing and pulling strength program and you get big arms, that might not be true for everybody. And that guy's probably an outlier in terms of genetics, and he can get away with barely doing any direct arm work and his arms will look fantastic. And I know guys like that. I mean, there's guys who barely go to the gym and their arms look great and they have great separations, their bicep looks hard, solid, great look, I mean, great shape. That's it, right? They have the genetics. But what do you do if you're a non-responder? And for these non-responders, this video, if you're a non-responder, you're gonna find this video very, very valuable, which will allow you to maximize your growth potential. So let's get started. Number 1 mistake. This is the most common mistake that I see, and across gyms around the world. I've seen this happen more than 40 gyms in different countries, continents. Probably the most common mistake out there in general in training, that is rushing progression in weight at the expense of proper technique. And with arms, this is especially important because arms are generally done at the end of the workout with those isolation movements that are supposed to add on some extra stress on top of those compound lifts. And at the end of the workout, when you're a little bit of fatigued and you want to show off a little bit that you can do heavy curls, you will start cheating on your technique. And it's not uncommon to walk into a gym and see a guy doing some curls with 185 pounds for 10 reps. His bicep is doing barely any work. This is the most common mistake that I see guys making. I mean, they're cheating the mechanics of the lifts, and the actual muscle group that you're targeting, which in this case of the curl is the bicep, is barely doing any work. If you think about it, how much of that force, how much of that weight is actually being transferred into a bicep if you're doing like a full swing, using your whole body, using momentum, using all sorts of tricks and hacks to cheat the movement? How much of that weight is really put on bicep? Barely any, right? So this guy would probably get better growth if he would do a complete weight reset and start from an empty bar, just do 10 proper reps and start adding weight slowly and maintaining proper technique throughout the whole movement for every single repetition, and just start building proper technique and proper progression. And in this case, what I recommend is using a 0 tolerance policy when it comes to technique. If the technique, if it's not full range of motion, if there's any cheating whatsoever, if you're cheating mechanics of the lift, even a tiny little bit, the rep doesn't count. Just don't count the rep. Even if you finish the rep target, don't count it. Because if you think about it, what is progression? Well, here's a basic one. Let's say curls, target reps 10 or 12. Let's say 10. When you reach 10 reps with a certain weight, the weight is supposed to go up, and now you're supposed to get again to those 10 reps. But what if you cheat your reps? Well, you're giving yourself props and credits for reps that you don't deserve, or that are cheat reps, the reps that aren't actually working your bicep, and now you're rushing the progression. So now you're forcing yourself to do extra weight, but you haven't even mastered the previous one. So what's gonna happen at the end of it, you're gonna have to do cheating, you have to use momentum, and it's gonna start becoming, oh, I'm the guy who can lift heavy on curls, and now you're kind of playing an ego game where every time you step in the gym, you have to lie to yourself that you can do this amount of weight on curls, and you don't wanna go back. Because guys are really stubborn when it comes to technique. They don't want to go back and wait. Like everybody hates doing a weight reset. Everybody hates going back and wait and fixing their form. And it takes years to learn this lesson, and I learned it the hard way that ego lifting, number one, doesn't get you any progress. Number two, you're risking injury. So it's basically a lose-lose situation. So number one mistake, fix your technique, work on proper technique. Don't cheat the mechanics of the lift. Put in the effort. I'm not going to rant on this anymore. I see this mistake happen all the time. Don't lie to yourself. Do a favor to yourself and be real and see if your technique is proper. If it is, start building that. And it's not uncommon to do a complete reset, take 50% of weight off and start building technique properly and progressing in that full range of motion using some progression scheme. And from that then on, you can get stronger and stronger and stronger in a proper way. And it's not going to be as fast. It's not going to involve ego, but it is going to be the right way. There's a right way to do things and there's a wrong way to do things. So make sure that you're doing the right thing and that you're being truthful to yourself. The second huge mistake is what I like to call fuck around-itis. And I actually took this term from Martin Berkham, who is a guy who first popularized intermittent fasting and his lean gains approach with his 16-hour fasting window and 8-hour eating. He was the guy who calls this fuck around-itis. Basically, it's not committing to certain lifts. It's starting to do all these drop sets, supersets, myo reps, trisets, quarter sets, or whatever the hell. And you're not committing to basic progression. You're constantly switching movements. 1 week, cable curls, the next week, hammer curls, week after that, dumbbell curls, spider curls, easy curls, barbell curls, like non-stop changing, never committing to a certain lift where you can actually progress, learn the movement, and add weight and do that movement in proper form. Because proper form, it actually takes time to learn. And also, once you get the proper form, if you change the movement, now you need to learn the form again because it's not the same movement. It actually takes some learning curve, and especially with more complicated movements, this is very common. So you want to make sure that you commit to a certain lift and invest time into a progression scheme, adding more weight over time while you're maintaining your form. So you can see that the mistake number 1 and 2 kind of complement each other. So once you master the technique, now it's about the progression. So if you keep lifting the same weight as you were in 2 years from now as you're lifting right now, you probably won't make much progress because the muscle growth responds in a way from you increasing volume and workload over time. So there's a reason the muscle will grow, and that reason has to be provided through progressive overload. And progressive overload is only going to happen if you actually commit to certain lifts for a period of time, and then you can switch it up every 8 to 12 weeks with a new movement if you desire so, or to break through a plateau when a certain movement stalls. But it's completely fine to do a curl and stick to that one curl for 12 weeks if necessary, if that curl is progressing in weight every single week or every 2 weeks, and you can basically milk out the progress as much as you can through that movement. Then when that stalls, pick a new movement, right? So that is the mistake number 2. Avoid the fuck around-itis. Don't do all these magical little methods and tips and tricks that you see on the internet. Do the basics, which literally give you 90% of the results, instead of trying to incorporate some weird angle for the bicep. That's just a waste of time if you're not actually adding more weight in the proper technique that is supposed to be done anyway. So the third final common mistake, that I see guys is either under-recovering, so basically doing too much for their arms, or they're always recovered. So they're not doing enough volume, or they're doing too much volume for that specific muscle group. So what that means necessarily is that there's an optimal amount of workload that you can put on a muscle group to get that muscle group to grow. And this is also a moving target. As you progress with age, with your training age, as you increase, as you get more experience, it's probably gonna go up a little bit so you can recover from more volume. So now really, if your muscle group is not growing and you feel that it's always recovered, you're never sore in your bicep, it's basically completely recovered from workout to workout, you might benefit from adding more to the biceps. So the way you can do that easily is to double the frequency, or basically increase the frequency at which you train your biceps. So that's a very easy way to increase your volume. Volume is sets times reps times weight. And when you increase the frequency, basically you train the bicep one more time that week, you will increase the volume, and then you can monitor the response and see whether that's giving you more growth. And for guys who are non-responders, they typically need to do more volume for those muscle groups that will make the muscle group grow. Again, there's a threshold, there's a maximum recoverable volume after which you will start experiencing negative effects because you had too much work. So it's about finding that sweet spot. And this is a little bit of advanced way of looking at it, because that's why I put this mistake as number 3, because the first 2 mistakes will naturally increase your volume as you invest in progressive overload, which is the mistake number 2. And of course, the technique has to be proper to begin with in order for you to get the growth. So the third thing is very important, but only after you handle the mistake number 1 and 2. And the final bonus tip that I want to say here, if you're a late intermediate lifter who's been lifting for 2-3 years, don't expect overnight results if you're in a caloric deficit and if you apply these tips, right? So if you're in a caloric deficit, you're not maximizing muscle growth. And for newbies, for someone who's just starting out, if you're in the first 6 months of lifting, you can experience a lot of newbie gains. You will get great results, especially if you're kind of an overweight beginner. You might get a lot of gains in the beginning, even though you're losing fat and you are in a caloric deficit, because your body has so much energy coming from fat stores, and you can use that energy to build muscle, while someone who is an intermediate lifter who is already fairly lean probably and wants to get to a 6-pack level or even get completely shredded, you might not experience that much growth for one reason, because number 1, you're in a caloric deficit. Number 2, arms and shoulders and back and typically chest are the muscle groups that will lose fat first, and that will decrease the size of the muscle itself. So it might feel like you're getting less size. But on the other hand, if you apply these tips and if you really get that proper definition and shape, and if you train the muscle group properly, it might even look bigger, even though if you use a tape measure, it will be smaller. Like, it will measure smaller, but it will look bigger. So there's a little bit of a illusion game here, and that's what bodybuilding is at the end of the day. It is an illusion. So it's about creating an illusion of size, and often you'll see guys who lose 20 pounds of fat and they look bigger than they were when they had extra 20 pounds on them. That's just not, something that we see every day. And then on magazine pictures and things like that, guys often look much bigger than they are in reality, where in reality, they're probably small if you compare it to some guy who's really tall and bulky. So those are the tips that I want to share with you guys here in this video. As I said, in-depth video. If you apply these, you will maximize your growth. And now I would love to hear from you in the comments below. What do you think about your genetics for arms? Do you think you're a good responder? Do you think you're an average responder? Or do you think you're a responder who is barely getting any growth from your training and you have to do all sorts of weird things to get the growth? So let me know in the comments below, which one of these categories do you feel like you're in? And aside from that, make sure to hit that subscribe button below to support the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.